In a quiet house in Ohio, Emily Carter's life began to follow a rigid, inexplicable schedule. Every night at 2:17 a.m., she vanished. At 2:46 a.m., she returned. During those 29 minutes, the environment inside the house changed. The usual hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of clocks seemed to stop, replaced by a silence so heavy it physically prevented her roommate from following her. When Sarah managed to watch the front door, she didn't see someone wandering in their sleep. She saw Emily's body jerk upright as if pulled by wires. Emily walked out the front door and into the freezing night, moving with a mechanical precision that ignored the gravel under her bare feet. This timeline tracks the porch security footage Sarah recorded. You can see the feed working perfectly until Emily steps onto the porch. At that exact second, the signal flatlines into static. For 29 minutes, the camera records nothing. When the signal returns at 2:46, Emily is already back inside, standing in the hallway and staring directly into the lens. The house remained perfectly locked. The security system never tripped. But when Emily woke up, she was covered in physical evidence of a journey. Mud was packed deep under her fingernails, and she smelled of wet earth and oxidized metal. This was a coordinated, recurring event. Emily's own body was acting as a specialized vehicle, operating under a set of instructions that her conscious mind couldn't access. The fourth night left behind more than mud. Emily woke with a deep, bleeding laceration on her arm and a name written across her palm in jagged black ink: Michael. Police cross-referenced the name and found Michael Reyes, a local mechanic who had been missing for 3 months. Reyes had vanished while leaving work at 2:10 a.m., just minutes before the time Emily's episodes always began. Reyes's car had been found abandoned near a service road on the far edge of town. There was no record of Emily ever visiting that area, and no physical way for her to travel that distance on foot and return within her 29-minute limit. The name on Emily's hand provided the first physical link between her bedroom and a 3-month-old disappearance. Investigators now had a specific person to look for, and a specific reason to be at Emily's house at 2:17 a.m. On the 5th night, 2 officers and a camera crew sat in Emily's living room. They were there to intercept her, to finally see where she was going and who she was meeting. At 2:17 a.m., Emily stood up and bolted. She moved with an athletic intensity her body shouldn't have been capable of, sprinting barefoot through the neighborhood and into the dense woods behind the houses. The officers struggled to keep their flashlights trained on her as she tore through the undergrowth. She stopped at the edge of a clearing. When one officer called out to her, she turned around. The body camera footage shows her smiling, but the expression was fixed and predatory, a look the officers later testified was completely unrecognizable as Emily. Suddenly, every piece of electronic equipment on the scene died. For 11 seconds, the woods went pitch black. When the power returned, one officer was on the ground with a severe head injury, and Emily had completely vanished from the clearing. The 11-second gap left the officers blind and vulnerable. By the time they regained their bearings, they were standing in a trap that had successfully isolated the target and incapacitated the pursuit. A massive search of the woods followed. Canine units eventually led investigators to a shallow pit a half-mile from the house. The earth was fresh, but the site was hidden deep within a thicket that would have been nearly impossible to navigate in the dark. Inside the pit, forensics discovered the remains of Michael Reyes. He wasn't alone. The site held the bones of at least 2 other unidentified victims, all showing signs of blunt force trauma. The timeline created a forensic impossibility. Michael Reyes had been buried the same night he disappeared, 3 months before Emily's 29-minute episodes ever started. At the time of his death, Emily was in a different city, with no physical way to be at this burial site. However, Emily's DNA was everywhere. The mud at the site was filled with her barefoot prints, tracing a continuous path between the grave and her back porch. She hadn't been there when the victims died, but she had been there recently, pacing the perimeter of the grave. The physical evidence suggested that Emily was being used for the burial chores. Her body was the instrument being piloted to maintain the gravesite and hide the evidence of crimes committed by someone else. Detectives began looking into Emily's childhood and found a report from 10 years earlier. At 8 years old, Emily had gone missing for exactly 29 minutes. When she was found, she was unharmed, but she kept telling the police about a man who lives under the ground. Digging deeper into the woods, beneath the shallow graves, police found the man's home. It was a crude bunker reinforced with rotted wood and rusted metal. It was a self-contained underground cell that had been occupied for years. The interior was filled with surveillance photos of Emily at every stage of her life, walking to school, sleeping, and standing on her porch. In the corner, someone had scratched a single phrase into a broken mirror. "She brings them to me." The surveillance photos and DNA evidence pointed to a specific, recurring role for Emily. Her body served as a remote delivery system for the bunker's occupant, a biological tool used to harvest and hide his victims while he remained hidden below the surface. Today, Emily Carter is under 24-hour observation in a secure medical facility, but at 2:17 a.m., the hospital's power grid consistently fails. The cameras go dark, and the temperature in her room drops. When the lights return, Emily is sitting upright, whispering the same 3 words as a promise to the person who still owns her time.